Some people make choices that completely wreck their lives, yet they never fully understand how they got there or why they did it. My wife, Lena, is one of those people. Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for being here today. I've got a fresh story to share, and trust me, this one's a hell of a ride. So let's jump right in. My name's Matthew, and if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted with everything, then this story might just hit a little too close to home. You see, I spent years believing that my wife, Lena, was my biggest supporter, the one person in my corner no matter what. Turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. This is the story of how I found out my wife was cheating on me with my boss, and the moment I saw it with my own eyes, I knew my life would never be the same again. I've always believed that if you put in the effort, the sacrifice, and the long hours, eventually, it all pays off. Hard work isn't just about punching in and out, it's about proving yourself, about building something real. I worked for Sterling Enterprises, one of the most prestigious firms in the industry. While others packed up and left right at 5 p.m., I stayed behind, making sure every report was flawless, every strategy airtight. I wasn't just doing my job, I was securing my future. And finally, after all those years, my dedication was about to be rewarded. The company was hosting its annual Sterling Enterprises dinner, a formal, high-stakes event where promotions weren't sent out through some email. No, they were announced in front of hundreds of executives, clients, and employees. If your name was called that night, it meant you weren't just another worker, you were someone who mattered. And this year, I knew I was one of the top contenders. I wasn't just up for a new title. This was about higher pay, better opportunities, and real power in the company. That night was supposed to be a celebration, not just for me, but for both of us. If there was one thing I never doubted, it was Lena. She was my wife, my partner, the person who had always made me believe in myself, even when I struggled. I never questioned her loyalty. Never had a reason to. At least, that's what I thought. The night of the company's annual dinner finally arrived, and the venue was exactly what you'd expect from a powerhouse like Sterling Enterprises: expensive, elegant, and filled with the kind of people who could make or break careers with a single conversation. I felt proud, not just because of how far I'd come, but because of who was standing next to me. Lena looked stunning, as she always did. She had this effortless beauty about her, but tonight, there was something extra and elegance that made heads turn the moment we walked in. I introduced her to my colleagues, and, like always, she played the part perfectly. She knew exactly what to say, how to say it, and who to charm. People gravitated toward her, drawn in by her confidence, her laughter, the way she could hold a conversation like she was born for it. Even the senior partners, the ones who barely acknowledged most employees, took notice. I stood beside her, watching, soaking in the admiration she received. This was my wife, my partner, the woman I had built my life with. And in that moment, I felt damn lucky to have her by my side. But then, as the night went on, I started noticing things. Lena kept drifting toward Thomas, my boss. A man who wasn't just respected, but powerful. He held influence, controlled opportunities, decided who moved up and who stayed exactly where they were. At first, I told myself it was nothing. She was just being friendly. That's who she was, right? She knew how to work a room. But then, I started seeing the small things, the way she leaned in just a little too close when he spoke, the way he murmured something I couldn't quite catch, and the way she smiled at him in return. It was a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. For the first time that night, I felt like an outsider at my own celebration. Like something was happening right in front of me, but I wasn't in on it. That uneasy feeling in my gut? It wasn't going away. A couple of hours later, Lena leaned in close, brushing her hand lightly against my arm. "I need to take this," she said, lifting her phone just enough for me to see. I glanced at the screen. No name. Just a number. I nodded. Yeah, sure. I'll be here. She gave me a quick smile, squeezed my arm, and disappeared into the crowd, just another elegant figure slipping away between well-dressed executives and servers balancing trays of champagne. At first, I didn't think much of it. I stayed focused on the conversations around me, nodding along as my colleagues discussed market trends and upcoming projects. But then 10 minutes passed. No sign of her. Another 5. I casually scanned the room, expecting to spot her near the bar or caught up in conversation with someone. Nothing. I checked my phone. No messages. Maybe she stepped outside where it was quieter? Maybe the call was just running longer than she expected? I turned back to my conversation, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling creeping up my spine. But then another 5 minutes passed. And another. 30 minutes had gone by, and suddenly, that nagging feeling wasn't so easy to dismiss. Someone nudged my arm, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Jake, one of my colleagues. We weren't exactly close, but we'd worked together enough to have a decent rapport. He leaned in slightly, swirling the whiskey in his glass, and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Man, you've got patience." If my wife was getting that cozy with my boss, I'd be asking questions. I let out a dry laugh, but my stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" I asked, even though I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. I kept my voice steady, casual, like I wasn't already feeling the ground shift beneath me. "What are you talking about?" Jake took a slow sip of his drink, then shrugged like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Come on, man. We all see it. She's been cozying up to Thomas all night, laughing, touching his arm, giving him those looks." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I forced a smile and muttered something about how my wife was just being friendly, but deep down, I knew. That uneasy feeling in my stomach? It had twisted itself into something sharper, suspicion. I glanced at my watch. 35 minutes. That's how long it had been since Lena excused herself to take a call. I started scanning the room, searching for her in the sea of executives, servers, and colleagues. But no matter where I looked, she wasn't there. Maybe she was at the bar? I checked. Nothing. The balcony? People often stepped out for some fresh air. Empty. And then, it hit me. I hadn't seen Thomas in a while either. A cold realization snaked up my spine, the pieces falling into place in my head before I was even ready to accept them. My heartbeat picked up as I started moving through the venue, my steps quickening with every second. I wasn't even sure where I was going, I just knew I had to find her. As I turned into one of the quieter hallways, I passed the restrooms. That's when I heard it. A low murmur. Voices, muffled but distinct, barely audible through the thick doors. I slowed my steps, straining to hear, my pulse pounding in my ears. And then a moan. I froze. For a split second, I told myself I had misheard. That I was overthinking. That this was all in my head. But deep down, I knew. I stepped closer, stopping just inches from the restroom door. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but my voice was steady when I spoke. "Lena?" Silence. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to come out firmer this time. "Lena, are you in there?" Still nothing. Then a rustling noise. The unmistakable sound of people scrambling, of fabric shifting, of someone trying to make themselves look presentable. That silence? That hesitation? It told me everything. My patience snapped. My hand flew to my pocket, fingers gripping my phone. If I had to call security, I would. But before I could press a button, the door creaked open. Lena stepped out first. Her hair was slightly messy, strands falling loose around her flushed face. The dress that had fit her perfectly earlier in the night was now wrinkled, askew, like someone had been pulling at it. And then, Thomas. He stepped out right behind her, his tie loosened, his top shirt button undone. His face wasn't panicked like hers, it was unreadable, cold, calculating. Like he was already assessing the damage, already figuring out how to spin this. For a moment, the three of us just stood there. Frozen. No one spoke. But we didn't have to. The truth was standing right in front of me, clear as day. And the thing is, I didn't feel rage. I didn't explode, didn't yell, didn't throw a punch. I felt nothing. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and hit record. My voice was eerily calm. Today is the annual Sterling Enterprises dinner. This is my wife, Lena, and my boss, Thomas. I just caught them making out in a restroom together. Thomas stiffened. Lena gasped, stepping toward me, her voice breaking. Matthew, please, I lifted a hand, cutting her off. Don't. I didn't want to hear her excuses. Didn't want to hear why. I kept the camera on them for a few more seconds, capturing their perfect little lie crumbling right in front of me. Watching as they realized there was no way out of this. Then, without another word, I stopped the recording and turned around. And I walked away. I didn't say a single thing to either of them. There was nothing to say. Nothing left to fix. I didn't need an explanation from Lena, and I sure as hell didn't need a weak apology from Thomas. I left her there. Drove home alone. I didn't even care about the damn promotion anymore. While I was driving, my phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Then again. A text. A missed call. Another. I didn't even glance at it. Didn't want to see her name pop up on my screen. An hour later, the front door creaked open. Lena stepped inside. Her face was streaked with tears, her makeup smudged, she looked like she'd been crying the whole drive home. But I didn't care. She stood there for a moment, eyes searching mine, desperate for some kind of reaction. Some kind of sign that she could fix this. Matthew, I raised a hand, stopping her before she could get another word out. Don't. That was it. That was all I said. I didn't want to hear her explanation. I didn't want to hear how sorry she was. Because the moment I caught them, everything changed. The rest of the night passed in silence. No yelling. No arguing. Just nothing. I sat on the couch, staring at the TV, not even registering what was on the screen. She stood by the door, body tense, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. By the time I went to bed, the texts and calls had piled up. Somehow, the news had already spread, colleagues reaching out, wanting to know what had gone down. Why I had left early. I ignored them all. I didn't care about the whispers. The gossip. The aftermath. Because when I woke up the next morning, one thing was crystal clear. I was done. I knew Lena was somewhere in the house, probably sitting in silence, waiting, hoping I'd break first, that there was still something left to salvage. But there wasn't. I got out of bed, moving at my own pace, taking my time as I made my way to the kitchen. And there she was, sitting at the table, hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The moment I stepped in, her head snapped up, her bloodshot eyes locking onto mine, swollen from a night spent crying. Matthew, please. Her voice cracked, shaky, desperate. Begging. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, my face unreadable. I didn't say anything right away. Didn't offer her a shred of sympathy. I wasn't here to comfort her. I was here to end this. Our marriage is already over. My voice was calm, steady, absolute. There was no anger left, no need for shouting or accusations. The damage had already been done. Lena flinched like I had just slapped her. No, Matthew, please. It was a mistake, I messed up, I know I did, but we can get through this. I love you. I let out a dry, humorless laugh, shaking my head. You love me? I scoffed. Was it just Thomas, or are there more? She didn't answer. She didn't even try. And that silence? That told me everything I needed to know. I exhaled, pushing my chair back as I stood. My decision was already made. Your stay in this house expires when the divorce is finalized, I said, my tone flat, unwavering. After that, we're done. Tears spilled down her cheeks as her body trembled with sobs, the weight of her choices finally crashing down on her. I didn't stick around to watch. I turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the only thing she had left, the consequences of her own betrayal. News travels fast in corporate circles. But a scandal like this? It spreads like wildfire. At first, it was just whispers, colleagues exchanging glances, the occasional smirk when I walked by. I ignored it. I had no interest in being part of the office gossip mill. But by Monday morning, the higher-ups had gotten wind of what went down at the company dinner. Thomas, my boss, the powerful, untouchable man who controlled careers, was now the center of a storm he couldn't escape. See, getting caught sneaking around with an employee's wife? That wasn't just an embarrassing personal failure. It was a professional disaster. Sterling Enterprises prided itself on integrity, leadership, ethics. And Thomas? He didn't just cross the line, he obliterated it. An internal investigation was launched, and as they started digging, they found exactly what I expected. Thomas had a history of affairs within the company. Turns out, Lena wasn't the first. He had used his position, his influence, to manipulate women in the workplace. Some relationships were consensual, others blurred the lines, power disguised as mentorship. HR had ignored it before. But now they had evidence. Witnesses. A scandal too big to sweep under the rug. By the end of the week, Thomas was placed on leave. A week later? Fired. Just like that, the man who once decided the future of others had his own future ripped away. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I didn't care. By the time Thomas's downfall was complete, I had already moved on. Lena, on the other hand? She still didn't get it. Even after the dust settled, even after everything came crashing down, she still looked at me with those same desperate, confused eyes. Like she still couldn't understand why it had all fallen apart. Some people destroy their own lives and never fully grasp how or why they did it. She was one of them. And honestly, that wasn't my problem anymore. Weeks passed. Life felt normal again. Work was steady, my routine was back, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself. And then one night my phone buzzed. A single message. I miss you. Can we talk? I stared at the screen, letting the words sink in. I read it. I deleted it. And I moved on. No response. No closure. No conversation. She made her choices. And I made mine. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have given her another chance? Would you have stayed, tried to fix it? Or would you have done what I did, walked away? No second chances. No explanations. Here's the truth: some betrayals can't be undone. Some people only realize what they lost when it's too late. And by then, you won't even care anymore.